Dear viewers, welcome back to another episode of Editorial Analysis by Drishti IAS. In this segment, we focus on important editorials from major newspapers such as The Hindu, The Life Mint, Indian Express, Times of India, etc. for effective understanding of our students. Now, through this program, we primarily focus on three things. First, we try to link the editorial with that of the UPSC syllabus. Secondly, we try to decode or decipher what are the key points that are mentioned in the editorial. And lastly, and most importantly, we try to learn the key concepts, if any, that are mentioned in the editorial. We truly hope you love this initiative of the Dristhi IAS. Please feel free to give us your valuable suggestions so that we can strive to do better each and every day. So with a lot of gratitude in our hearts to our viewers, let us commence today's session of Editorial Analysis. Dear viewer, this video is available in Hindi as well. If you wish to watch it, please visit our Hindi YouTube channel, Drishti IAS. For your convenience, the link for this video in Hindi has been provided in the description below. Dear viewer, for today we have opted for the editorial titled The Foreign Hand from The Hindu, dated 25th September 2020. Now, the editorial simply speaks about the recently passed amendment to the FCRA Act. The editorial states that tightening of regulations could hamper the work of NGOs. Now let us try to link this editorial with that of the UPSC syllabus. It is very important from a mains perspective, so we can link it with general studies too, with polity and social justice as well. Also, to further narrow it down within general studies too, we can connect it to the role of NGOs, SHGs, various groups and associations, donors, charities, institutional and other stakeholders. So with this, let us go ahead to understanding what are the key points of the editorial. But before that, a simple context. See, as you are aware, you would have known that the Foreign Contribution Regulation Amendment Bill of 2020 was introduced in the Lok Sabha on September 20th, 2020, was passed in the Lok Sabha on September 21st, 2020, and was finally passed in the Rajya Sabha on September 23rd, 2020. Now, this itself is a matter of concern. Within 3 days, the government has passed a very important bill which did not have much discussions. Now, what are the key points that are stated in the editorial? Now, the recently introduced bill, which amended the FCRA Act of 2010, it simply tightens the regulations related to civil society organizations and NGOs. Now, these new regulations which have been introduced in this Amendment Act have placed strict conditions on civil society organizations, educational and research institutions, etc., especially related to financial ties, and all of these organizations that have partnerships with foreign entities. So now they have been placed under strict conditions. Now, the editorial says that, we need to accept the fact that a portion of foreign assistance may be reaching the wrong hands. We cannot say that all the NGOs are perfectly working. However, this notion that foreign influence is affecting our internal affairs, has kind of overlooked the rationality behind the new amendments, and maybe it was the passion, that has led to pushing of these new amendments. And there are a lot of concerns when we overlook rationality. Now, the concerns to begin with, first and foremost, let us understand that, sharing of ideas and resources across national boundaries. And when we say sharing of ideas and resources, it is not, strictly related to just the NGOs. Countries do transfer ideas and resources, organizations do the same, and also our very society. And this sharing of ideas and resources is very essential to the functioning of a global community. Now, NGOs, let us make it very clear that they of course do serve, extremely disadvantaged sections, where most of the governments or central state governments kind of overlook. A lot of NGOs work in the rural areas. A lot of NGOs have played a pivotal role in trying to raise awareness. And that is when they have, at times stepped in to fill fill the role where states are supposed to act. And in fact, they've also supplemented further than what the state government can do. Now, the concern that, see, of course, some of the restrictions which have been raised, which we will go to again at a later stage, are of course well-meaning, but these restrictions could definitely impact, NGOs, and most importantly, it can also project India to be a very over-regulated democracy. Now, especially the concern has been raised about the target group, that is, related to environmentalism, human rights, and civil liberties. Now, most of these organizations that work in these three sectors, their patriotism to the country have always been questioned, and they've always been placed in the limelight. Also, this new amendment and the new laws that have been introduced, it seems to be incompatible with the international obligations and our very own constitutional provisions on the rights, which we will deal with when we move further ahead. Now, with this, we have concluded the key points and the concerns that was raised in the editorial. And now we move towards the key concepts that we have to learn from the editorial. Now, to begin with, we have to focus on the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act of 2010. Now, before we go ahead, what is the foreign contribution? See, now foreign contribution is the donation or transfer of any currency, security, or article of a beyond a specified value by a foreign source. That is, me as an individual or as an entity receiving any form in the form of currency, security, or an article beyond the scope of specified value is considered as a foreign contribution. Now, the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act of 2010 was enacted. Why? To regulate the acceptance and utilization of foreign contribution or foreign hospitality for, again, now remember this point, for any activities that are considered detrimental, that is, in simple words, considered dangerous to our national interest. Now, the government has stated that, see, many recipients of foreign funding have not utilized it for the purpose for which they are registered. Now, if an NGO that deals with animal rescue, does not, receives funding from organization abroad, but yet does not involve in that activity, but channels that money towards other policies of our country, this can definitely be very dubious. So this is the concern that the government has many times raised. Also, see, it is important to know that, see, the annual inflow of foreign contributions has nearly doubled between 2010 and 2019, and this was on the basis of a recent report by the Ministry of Home Affairs. Also, the government has taken a tough stand. Other than the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, it has also cancelled the certificates of registration of almost close to 19,000 voluntary organizations between 2011 and 2019, accusing them of anti-national activities. Now, let us try to look what are the key features of the Amendment Act that was passed in the Parliament. Just certain important ones which are considered problematic. See, first and foremost, the prohibition to accept foreign contribution. Now, the Amendment Act has introduced certain individuals or entities cannot receive foreign contribution. Now, they include election candidates, the editor or publisher of a newspaper, judges, government servants, members of any legislature, and political parties, among others. Now, see, let us look at this point very clearly. See, I'm sure all of us agree that foreign contribution to any of these members, that is election candidate, editor or publisher of a newspaper, to a judge or to a government servant, members of any legislature and political parties, can be dangerous, simply because if you can try to convince them to change policy or, raise their voice on issues that might be, detrimental to us. Now, in this, the government has also included public servants, as defined under the Indian Penal Code. They are also prohibited. Now, let us remember that public servant includes any person who is in service or pay of the government or are remunerated by the government for the performance of any public duty. So the government has said that public servants are also incorporated and they are prohibited from accepting foreign contribution. Now, another key feature is the transfer of foreign contribution. Now, if I am an individual or an entity that runs a civil society organization or an NGO, if I receive foreign contribution, legally if I receive foreign contribution, I will not be able to transfer this to any other person, this amount that I receive. So, unless and until that other person has also got a certificate of registration to receive a foreign contribution, etc. But other than this, earlier you were permitted to do so, but now foreign contribution cannot be transferred to any other person, and the term person under the Act includes an individual, an association, or a registered company. Now, the third key feature that we have to look at is Aadhaar, the mandatory need of Aadhaar for registration. Now, as per rules, see, if we have to receive foreign contribution, we need a certificate of registration. Once we receive the certificate of registration, we will also have to renew it on a constant basis. Now, any person seeking prior permission, registration, or renewal of registration to receive foreign contribution must provide their Aadhaar number, and it does not simply stop with them. Now, if I am a member of the NGO and I'm requesting permission, registration or renewal of a registration, then I need to submit my Aadhaar number. Now, this does not stop with me. If I have other members who are board of the trust, now that is what it says, that Aadhaar number of all its office bearers, directors, key functionaries are also required as an identification document. Now, what if there is foreigner? Then they must provide a copy of the passport or the Overseas Citizen of India card for identification. Now, this has been a matter of concern because the Supreme Court has still been debating about Aadhaar card in India. Now, the next key feature is the FCRA account. Now, a registered person must accept a foreign contribution only in a single branch of a scheduled bank specified by them. However, they need one account that receives this FCRA. All of this foreign contribution should come into one bank that is under the scheduled bank list. However, they are free to open more accounts in other banks for utilization of the contribution. However, all of this should come into one account, which is a scheduled bank. Now, restriction in the utilization of foreign contribution. Now, see, there are events where the government can accuse an NGO or a civil society organization for violating any provisions of the Act. If the NGO is found guilty of violating any provisions of the Act, the unutilized or unreceived foreign contribution may be utilized or received, but with prior approval of the central government. Alright, see, the government has also said that it will restrict the usage of unutilized foreign contribution for persons who have been granted prior permission to receive such contribution. That is, even if the government has permitted you to receive and utilize the contribution, if you are found guilty, of violating any provisions of the FCRA Act, the unutilized or unreceived foreign contribution, which is there in your scheduled bank account, can be only spent with the prior approval of the central government. And another feature is reduction in the use of foreign contribution for administrative purpose. Now, the government has made it very clear that the foreign contribution that you receive must be used only for the purpose for which the contribution is received. Now, if I want to start an NGO that deals with animal rescue and I request, entities from other countries to support me, then I should be using my foreign contribution only for the purpose for which I have requested this contribution. This means we cannot even use more than 50% of the contribution for meeting administrative expenses. The bill, which was later passed as an act, has reduced this to 20%. That is, only 20% of the money can be used for administrative purposes, and the rest can only be used for the actual activity for which we have requested the contribution. Now, those were the key features, and now let us try to look at the issues involved, or what are the concerns that has been raised. See, now, as we discussed earlier, caps on administrative expenses. Now, what is it currently at? 20%. Now, a lot of NGOs have raised a hue and cry about this because it can impact the livelihoods of workers associated with the small non-governmental organizations and lead to the killing of the entire sector. See, now a lot of these organizations, big ones that are settled in the city, have local NGOs that work, in tribal areas or in rural areas. So if you are cutting down on their administrative expenses, that is, for resources, etc., it can affect all of these small NGOs, which is a very valid concern. Now, another factor is the impact it will have on collaborative research. Now, as organizations receiving foreign funds will no longer be able to transfer them to small NGOs working at the grassroots level. See, again, as we said, foreign contribution, if you receive, you cannot send it to a third party to conduct a survey. For example, if I am an organization, I want to know about the MMR rate in a village or in a rural area, I will have to be able to transfer the fund that I have received. But now, since the government has put a restriction on this, then it is very hard for any small NGOs to sustain. Now, third point is crushing competitiveness and creativity. See, now we agree that the government intent is to regulate dubious NGOs, which is necessary and is also a need of the hour. But if you label all of the NGOs as dubious and start looking at them without proving them guilty, and rather failing to recognize the diversity of these NGOs, then we are actually going to crush their competitiveness and creativity for any simple fault or error. And many of these NGOs are also recognized as world-class organizations, and they're also recognized globally. But if you consider all of them as dubious without realizing the diversity, then obviously we are going to crush their competitiveness and creativity. And lastly, and most importantly, it is incompatible with international law. See, the UN HRC resolution has said that no law should criminalize or delegitimize activities in defense of human rights on account of the origin of foreign funding. So now this has been a common trait in a lot of the countries, where a lot of international organizations, for example, the Human Rights Watch or the Amnesty International, has been accused of being a front for Western powers. All right. So the UNHRC resolution has said that no law should be made that can criminalize or delegitimize activities of human rights organizations only on the basis of origin of funding, because a lot of these countries have rules that say funding is from foreign powers and they tend to be detrimental to our national interest. Also, this amendment that we have passed, it fails to comply with our obligation towards international rules and law, and also our constitutional provisions, where our constitution has said that we respect and protect the rights to freedom of association, expression, and freedom of assembly. Alright, so these are the issues that are involved in the Amendment Act that we have introduced. So with this, we have concluded the issues involved and also the key concepts that we had to learn from the editorial. And now we try to look at it from the UPSC aspect. Now, from a prelims aspect, I would say that it is very rare that questions can come later to NGOs. But for mains, this is a very hot topic for the UPSC. Now, this was a question that had appeared. Examine critically the recent changes in the rules governing foreign funding of NGOs under the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act of 1976. Now, just imagine, this is the recent amendment we was asked. So definitely the UPSC can ask you to be critical about the recent changes that was brought about in the FCRA Act of 2010. Now, another question that we can look at is the how can the role of NGOs be strengthened in India for development works relating to protection of the environment? Discuss throwing light on the major constraints. This is with reference to the recent issues related to Greenpeace, etc. So, dear students, when you try to answer these questions, always make sure that you incorporate a lot of the current events that has happened. Okay. So with this, we conclude today's session of editorial analysis. I hope we have done a thorough justice to this topic. And dear viewers, please feel free to give us your valuable suggestions so that we can strive to do better each and every day. So until next time, thank you, stay safe and good night.